And our presentation, Slow Down, Bike Safely, and Enjoy the City. I am representing the American Institute of Architects LA chapter, the Committee on the Environment. I'm an architect and I work for a green building consulting company. And you might wonder, what do architects have an interest in bikes for? Well, we have an interest in infrastructure, and we also have an interest in seeing how our buildings can help bikes. And the entrance of bikes and programming and things like that. So making it easier for bikes to access our buildings. So this morning we're going to talk about a lot of, how many people here, by the way, came here on bike? Just a couple people on bike.
How about on foot?
And foot? Yes, that counts.
30 minutes.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Good walk. Well, if you didn't know, the first 100 people that rode their bikes that checked into the conference get a free certificate to a coffee shop around here. So there you go. All right, so today we're going to talk about bikes and what is happening in LA as far as the city goes and advocacy and also a case study. So we have a really interesting panel here. We have a bike plan update from the City of LA with Michelle Mowry. We also have a bike sharing case study that Ilaria Mazzolini has conducted with her students at SciArc. And we also have a bike advocacy update with our LA Bike Coalition regional chapter in the Santa Monica area, the Santa Monica Spoke, Richard McKinnon, sorry. So, and then after that we'll have a Q&A discussion. Okay. There are credits for any architects in the room and for anybody involved in the U.S. Green Building Council credit, looking for credits. So we have our learning objectives here. So if you want to get any credit, just come up afterwards and see me and give me your name and your architect number, etc., and you'll get credit for it. Here's our speakers again, and I'll introduce our first speaker, Michelle Mowry. Let's see here. Michelle is the Senior Bike Coordinator in the Los Angeles Department of Transportation's bike program, and she's been with the LADOT's bicycle program for over 17 years and works with the city's engineering and planning staff on the implementing of the city's 2010 bicycle plan. I'm sure maybe all of you have heard of it. Adopted by the City Council in March of 2011, the plan's primary purpose is to increase, improve, and enhance bicycling in Los Angeles through the build-out of a bikeway network of 1,680 miles and development of support programs and legislation in Los Angeles. Michelle's group, Bicycle Outreach and Planning, is responsible for the bicycle plan's policy implementation, including bicycle parking, encouragement, legislation, mapping, and social media, as well as working with the public and engineering staff in the development of bikeway networks. A founding board member of the California Bicycle Coalition and USA Cycling Bicycle Racer, Michelle is a native Southern Californian and learned to ride at the age of 4. Her first bike was a purple Schwinn Stingray. Welcome, Michelle.
Good morning, everybody. I hate standing behind these podiums, so no, I think I can do it. Here comes AV assistants. So I'll just ask everybody, who's got a bike? Show of hands. Who's got air in their tires? Okay, this is good. You know, while we're doing this, as Lloyd mentioned, I grew up here. I've been riding here since I was 4. I never really stopped, and so I've just kind of kept doing it, which kind of led me to this job, the bike racing thing. And, well, it's good on the screen, but it is okay. There we go. So I've been doing this job for 17 years, and when I started doing this, nobody cared that I was here. The engineers really didn't care that I was here, and nobody in the city really wanted to see us do anything for bikes. So I probably spent most of the first 5 years just showing up at every meeting I could to integrate bikes into what was going on, whether it was transit or urban planning or any of the plans that we were doing. One of the first tasks was the development of the city's 1996 bicycle plan. We worked on it for a couple of years. We probably had at 3 public meetings a total of 15 people show up to talk about bikes who had any interest that we were doing this plan and moving things forward. It has changed drastically. In the last 5 years, we've had hundreds upon hundreds of people comment, be angry at me that we haven't done more, and are helping to move the agenda forward. As you may have known, Mayor Villaraigosa crashed on his bike 2 years ago and has been one of our biggest supporters ever since. So we are moving forward, we're doing lots, and I'm going to talk to you today about this new plan. Maybe, there we go. So as a part of moving forward with the plan, what we really looked at is we wanted to figure out who was riding that question, the do you have bike and air in your tire sort of thing. But this is what we were trying to find out. Who in the city is riding and how are they riding? So we had a baseline. So we know a lot of people ride for recreation. 80% of people in LA own a bike. We have almost 4 million people now. When I started with the city, we had 2.8 million people. We're almost up to 4. So we are significantly changing, and our roadway patterns are significantly changing. And if you don't live in LA, you probably live in a surrounding area to LA. So how LA designs and develops its roadways affects everybody in this region. So we know that 75% of Angelenos have a bike and they are riding for recreation. And then there's a breakdown of how that works on. Some are riding for fitness, some are riding to commute to get places, and that is changing and growing. Some people are racing bikes like I did once upon a time, and some people are doing it for sport, meaning they're riding centuries or doing fun rides and things like that. As I mentioned, the population, and this is before the new census, was 36, but we are now at, I think it's 38.9, so we are almost at 4 million people. A lot of those people, some of those people ride daily, but a lot of people ride sometimes. We kind of look to see who is doing what out there on their bikes, but 60% of Angelenos have a bike and are riding it sometimes, so we know that those are folks who could make short trips on bikes, and 20% of all trips in the Los Angeles area are under 2 miles, which is right for bikes. You don't have to get on your bike and ride 20 miles to work every day. You can ride your bike to get a gallon of milk, you can ride your bike to go grocery shopping, the post office. So there are small trips that you can pick off, and that's really going to help air quality and congestion if you do that. There's lots of stuff to help you do that with your bike now. A whole lot of trailers, equipment baskets, that's stuff that we couldn't find. You used to have to go to Europe to find this stuff, and I used to bring this stuff home from trips. But now you can get trailers and baskets and stuff to help you do all those little short trips. So our bicycle plan, our new bicycle plan, which was adopted by council in March of this year, even though it says 2010, council finally did get it adopted in March of this year, breaks into 3 components. There's the overall plan document, which is about the policies, cost estimates, more demographic information that builds on what we were talking about before, and a basic list of how the streets would be developed. All the map lines on this map are included in a spreadsheet somewhere at the back of this document that shows you what streets are supposed to get what treatment. So if you're looking to see if your street is on the map and you find it in the map, you cross-reference it with this document to see, where it's supposed to go to and what the treatment's supposed to be that's supposed to get on it. This is essentially the engineer's Bible, and it's to get the city and the public all on the same page about how we develop a bikeway and how it's developed. We being folks that do what I do and our engineering staff, talk about bikeways in terms of 3 types, and we've just added a 4th type of facility. The state of California calls a bicycle path, a class 1 bicycle path, those are things like the Beach Bike Path and Ballona Creek, separated from the roadway, a bicycle path. Then we have bicycle lanes on the street, which is just a striped lane, that's a separate little lane just for bicycles. We have bicycle routes that at one point just had a sign that said bicycle route. We're starting to add sharrows or shared lane markings to those. I know other cities are doing them as well. As a matter of fact, our engineers are out in the field right now. They started at 9 o'clock last night, putting another 20 miles of sharrows down in the city of LA. So we're moving forward on that. But we're also talking about a new type of facility in the design handbook book called A Bike-Friendly Street, which would fall under the Class 3 bicycle route category. But for us, a bike-friendly street is also known as a bicycle boulevard in other places. And the idea is to get to smaller residential streets where a lot of bicyclists ride already, with slow-moving traffic, and essentially to provide facilities for folks who want to ride in their neighborhood but don't want to ride on Wilshire Boulevard or Santa Monica Boulevard, because even though there might be a bicycle lane there, it's really fast traffic. So these are facilities that we really want to enhance for children and women and senior citizens. And you know, when we first started working on this plan 5 years ago, I realized that when I was grocery shopping in my neighborhood or riding to my local, I actually rode too, so riding to my local boathouse again, I was riding those smaller streets too, that I found that I didn't want to be in traffic even though I was capable of it. And that's how I moved the concept forward. So the plan's goals are to increase the number and types of bicyclists who ride in the city. I mentioned women, children, senior citizens. We're not seeing those folks on bikes. What we have is 20, 30, and some 40 and 15-year-old males that are riding bikes. Those are the ones that are out there braving the conditions. That's been gradually changing over the last 5 years. We're certainly seeing more women on bikes, but we're also getting a lot more demand for facilities because they don't want to be out there in those high-speed roadways with cars. We want to make every street a safe place to ride a bike, and that's about enforcement by LAPD and others to make sure bicyclists and motorists are following the laws and everybody can coexist safely. It's also about street maintenance. It's a tough time budget-wise, but we really want to impress upon our Public Works Bureau of Street Services that the streets that have bikeways on them or have a high volume of bicyclists should get pothole repair sooner or resurfacing sooner than the other streets. They should be a priority because bike tires have a lot tougher time with potholes than motor vehicle tires. And then we want to make the City of LA a bicycle-friendly community. There is a group called the League of American Bicyclists, or LAB, and they're kind of the premier advocacy group in the nation, and they do a bike-friendly ranking of cities that apply for this sort of ranking. We just applied, we received an honorable mention, and they've given a list of things we can do to get to bronze. They level rank cities as gold, silver, and bronze. For instance, New York City, which has done just a glut of things in the last 2 years, has just moved to silver. So we're hoping we can get bronze next time around. But there's only one city that has the above and beyond, and that's Portland, that has a platinum rating. Nobody else has a platinum rating. So we want to make LA a bike-friendly community too. So I mentioned that first document and having policies and programs in that. There are 180 plus policies within the plan that have this purpose of increasing and improving and enhancing bicycle in the city and breaking it down into 3 goals, which are more and different types of bicyclists, making the streets safe, and making LA the bike-friendly community that we talked about. And then there are these 8 E's that all the policies break down. At first there were 4 E's, and then there were 5 E's, and now we've created 8 E's that the city can use. Things like equity, and equity breaking into things like access and parking and transit. Encouragement, education, enforcement, engineering, and that's where our department comes in. Economic, money that we can get and how bicycling encourages and builds on the economy. We're actually going to apply for a Tiger Grant for a mostly build out of the Los Angeles River path to actually connect everything for the first time, even though it won't do everything we want it to do. But we know we can support job enhancement with that, and we're going to apply for $25 million to build out that facility. Evaluation and cooperation, and then environment. And most people are here to talk about green cars and look at green cars. Well, you can't get much greener than a bike. So, and it burns calories and fat, so it's a healthy thing to do too. So the map document, the third piece of the overall plan, shows 1,680 miles, and I actually think it's like 1,683, and those are bicycle lanes, bicycle paths, bicycle routes, and those bike-friendly streets that we've talked about. They all fall into these 3 networks. The backbone, and I believe, I'm trying to remember, those are the purple marks on the document, and those are all the arterial streets, the big streets, Santa Monica Boulevard, Wilshire, things like that. And we want to look at squeezing down the lanes, which we've done a lot already, and or taking a travel lane or taking parking out to be able to get a bicycle lane in. Those are going to go through a lot of environmental review, and we're just starting that process as well. The neighborhood network are those bike-friendly streets, the streets that people are really tired of people using those as cut-through traffic, and flying down their neighborhood streets that should be at 25 miles an hour, but people are doing it at 40 miles an hour. And neighbors would like to have traffic calming in their neighborhoods, bulb outs, roundabouts, those sorts of things that slow cars down in their neighborhood. Those are the things we'd like to bring them with this bike-friendly neighborhood street. And then the green network are all the paths. I mentioned LA River, you know about Bayonne and the Breach Path. We're bringing Expo soon. We've just done Expo Phase 1, which are bicycle lanes on the street. But when it gets to Jefferson, it makes that turn in Culver City. So from USC, it goes really straight and then makes a little turn down to Santa Monica. We're building a bicycle path with the Expo Authority to do that. The technical design handbook I mentioned briefly. It's design guidance for bikeways. So it's essentially, so the engineers are all designing the same stuff that the public expects, that the state expects. When you build a bikeway, it's just like building a roadway for cars. The state has certain guidelines and certain rules that we're supposed to follow. So we do all that, and it's called out in there. But we also do one other thing in this plan that we've never done before. We're looking at innovative approaches or non-standard designs. There are a few cities that are really starting to move out of the box and do different things. Now, when they do that, they incur additional liability, so they have to be really careful and go through a testing process to do that. We call that out in this document, and we're going to try and move out of the box as well and go through a very structured testing process to do it, but at the same time try things different. And when we do that, we're talking about protected bicycle lanes. I don't know if people are aware that Long Beach has put in a protected bicycle lane, a buffered lane, but something where there's a little bit of space between you and traffic or a parked car between you and traffic. So things that are a little different that support a whole multitude of bicyclists rather than just the aggressive male rider. And then we want our city agencies to do it. We find that maybe Rec and Parks might be building a bikeway in the middle of one of their parks. We want them to follow the same standards that we do. And then it's just general education. By the way, these documents are all up on the web, and there'll be a site at the end for you to look at. So what we're looking at and where we are now in the implementation phase is closer coordination with our departments. Mayor Villaraigosa has issued a mayor's directive, which instructs every department head to implement this document. This has never happened for us before, so this is a really good thing. And we now have general managers of each department saying, what is this thing and how do we make it happen? We have a bicycle advisory committee in our advocacy community that we continue to work with to move the document forwards, and we have a bicycle plan implementation team. It's essentially anybody who wants to come about the projects and talk about the projects that we're moving forward or what we might move next. It's an open meeting, and actually the next one is October 3rd. We're doing this quarterly, so next Tuesday at 1 o'clock, come over to the Caltrans building, and you're welcome to sit in. And we're also talking about funding and staffing. That's a big issue for us. The city lost about a third of its workforce in the last couple of years, so we're trying to do all this new and exciting stuff with a lot less people. I mentioned the policy document. One of the policies in the document is a 5-year implementation strategy. So while the council adopted the overall document, they also adopted this 5-year plan for how we were moving forward over the next 5 years. It calls out the 200 miles that we're going to do first, and the idea is to get a semi-network going forward. Right now we have a kind of fragmented network that doesn't really connect to anything, so it will give you a 5-mile grid of us connecting the dots for the first time. As we process through the document over the year, we want to shrink that grid from 5 miles down to 1 mile. And when we implement the whole thing, that's what we'll end up with. And that's it. So I think we're going to let everybody talk, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next speaker is an instructor from SciArc, and she has a Bachelor of Architecture degree from the Polytechnic of Milano, Italy, and a Master of Building Science from the University of Southern California School of Architecture in LA. Since 2004, she's been a full-time faculty member in design and applied studies at the Southern California Institute of Architecture in Los Angeles. She teaches seminars and design studios in the undergraduate and graduate programs. Issues related to sustainable architecture and building techniques at all design scales are topics that she has explored over the past 15 years in her professional and academic career. In the past 5 years, the focus of her research office, IM Studio Mila, has has centered on biomimicry, innovation in architecture inspired by nature. Ilaria has written extensively on the interrelationships between the built environment and nature. She's a regular contributor to Avatarian magazine online with her column Out in the City. Welcome, Ilaria.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. I will present a case study. So as Michelle presented the overview from the Los Angeles city of the bike plan, we started small with a neighborhood attitude. But what I first like to show you is where we were with biking where we were in the 70s with the idea of portraying Los Angeles, and what someone that was coming to visit us in that period of time, how he would describe the city to us. It's a clip of 2 minutes. It's very short.
That's Los Angeles. You can always recognize it by it. And that's me, Rainer Banham, crossing the road. I'm Professor of the History of Architecture at University College London. You might wonder what I'm doing in Los Angeles, which makes nonsense of history and breaks all the rules. Well, I love the place with a passion that goes beyond sense or reason. I come here as often as I can, but this time there's an added attraction.
Welcome to Los Angeles, super city of the future, the metropolis of Southern California. For the benefit of discriminating visitors, this car has been equipped with the Beta Car Visitor Guidance System, courtesy of Pennywise Car Rentals and Sunset Gasoline. The clean gasoline.
Helps fight strong.
Now you're ready to go. Begin by following the signs for Century Boulevard so that you can concentrate fully on your driving. Switch off the guidance system when you hear the tone. Have a nice day, and here comes the switch off tone.
Baedeker is a fiction, a joke tribute to Carl Baedeker, the father of the modern guidebook. A useful fiction. Devising a guide is a good way to explain a city, and Los Angeles needs some explaining, because it's normally regarded as an unspeakable sprawling mess, though certainly not by me. So, where shall we send our visitor first? Soon Century Boulevard will link up with the freeway system, and some lightning decisions will have to be made, because the freeways are unforgiving. Shall we go 20 miles north to the beach cities for sun and fun and surf? Shall we go 20 miles northeast? To you know where?
I'm stopping it here, but online you'll find the entire movie if you wish. So I think a lot of stereotypes that he's showing, they still exist, and a lot of visitors that come to LA today are still thinking of LA in this such manner. But what we are talking about today is a different type of city. And I think we are very lucky. I come from Italy, and we don't have any of these features in a way, even though often we look at Europe as a place where a bike-friendly place. Some places, some cities or some nations are not as advanced, even though this morning I had to wait 2 buses in order to put my bike on it. So I certainly have some complaints to add, and Michelle already answered to my complaints, so I already did my share. But another thing that strikes me is that you can take your bike on the metro, because usually metros are so busy in other cities, and in LA, actually, besides a few hours a day, it's possible to do so. And these are some clips of a day I was in the metro and seeing, a passenger carrying his bicycle. We have seen also in the past few years some great commercials and advertisements about sharing the way. I think one of the major issues is this perceived safety issue, or through safety issues. Maybe Richard will talk about that also, but I feel that if in LA we can bike, if they can bike in Manhattan, I think we can bike in LA as well. And if they bike in Minnesota, I think we can bike in LA as well. But not only we have seen biking to go to work, as Michelle was showing, there is a breakdown of reasons why people like to bike and to enjoy bicycle. And that takes us to a lifestyle. I think to change our lifestyle is ultimately what we are about. And these are some slides from Burning Man, where bicycle is certainly the mode of transportation, with all Burning Man comes from. And then just the other day on Facebook, I found this image and I found it so inspiring that it will become my poster from here on. I don't know if with these slides you really appreciate it, but someone is using it as a mode of transportation for work. Maybe he has got no choices, but I think it's a piece of art what he is doing. It's not just transporting some bricks. So there is really a variety of way of looking at what a bicycle is and what it allows us to do. What we did with a small group of students was to explore Wilshire Center along the Wilshire axis with the BID, the local BID, and Gary Russell was leading the team and helping us to understand this particular site on Wilshire. We did it a couple of years ago when the bike plan of the city was under development, so we had the fortune to be able to go to some of the meetings and learn about the vision of the city at large. Our perspective and point of view was, why don't we start from a neighborhood? So the city has to have this large vision, but how can we implement it from a different scale, from the small scale? So we went through a series of exercises with the students and a series of design solutions and options that we then presented to the CRA, the local CRA community, and then to the city and to Metro. We have been part of some of the meetings that the larger community had in the past couple of years. So we went through surveying, looking at different places in the world where bike sharing actually were deployed, and then making some proposal. The starting point was to deploy a bike sharing. Bike sharing is not owning your bicycle, but renting bicycle per hour, per day at particular stations and then return it. It's something that many other cities have done it. LA does not have it yet. And so we thought, where better than along the Wilshire axis to have something like that? Where better than Wilshire Center that has 3 metro stops in its own territory on Vermont, Western, and I'm missing the third one. Normandy, sorry, blank. So doing that was really something that was important for us to see where, by not owning a bicycle, by not having to wait for the bus to put your bicycle on, could you be freer in the city actually? Could you really use different mode of transportation? And so the starting point was that, and we went through the survey. The students went and surveyed and asked 160 people and reported different experiences, from the fact that many people didn't even know what a bike sharing was, to what really the users of this area would be facilitated by the usage of bike sharing. Is that their area of the city of medium-high density with a lot of residential in the northern part and a lot of commercial along the Wilshire axis. So there is a great diversity, and is also reaching restaurants and nighttime life. So we studied all this. We did the precedents, understanding the program, understanding the city usage, and seeing that there are also a lot of parking lots. A lot of our city land is occupied by parking lots. So in freeing perhaps all these parking spaces, we could have new areas to use for other usage. So looking also what is a public space today is another line part of this class. So we looked at precedences, as I was mentioning, more or less successful. One of the reasons of why cities are not implementing or are resisting is that because every time they do case studies, they say DC had to shut it down and other cities have been not successful. So the model is not very clear quite yet. It's still pioneering. So we presented options with that, starting really from the plan that Michelle explained very carefully just before. That was our departing point. We didn't ignore it. It would be foolish to do so. But we concentrated in the rectangular area of the Wilshire Center. And we reported the two type of bike lanes that Michelle was describing. There are bike lanes that are the ones described on the floor, and then there are bike-friendly streets where traffic is less intense and bikers like to bike. So in looking at what the city was proposing for the area, we thought we could implement several other streets in this neighborhood at that level. And we should do it in different phases also. We have to recognize that things happen over time, long time. So when you start at small scale, you start with one element and then you keep adding to it. And so thinking in phase is more effective. And then we looked at the different areas where we should have these bike sharing points. And of course, the main ones would be at the metro stations. And later we could implement, there is a new LAUSD huge campus, and there is the Southwestern Law School. So those are other areas where we could have those. And we kept developing in phase one, and then phase two keep adding. And we started different street sections from the largest as Wilshire Boulevard to the smallest one, provoking also some of the conversations about should we share the sidewalks. Wilshire Boulevard has large sidewalks. And I know that it's not that easy, and that's why it's controversial. But if you walk also, there are not that many people walking. So why can't we split the wide sidewalks into two and use it for safely bike in a very busy street that I wouldn't be comfortable. Michelle herself will say she prefers a smaller street. So all these conversations came about. As we know, we are not, we were just proposing opportunity. So we studied different ways where to put the bike lane, if between parking or between the sidewalk or sharing the sidewalk, etc. And then we came back and developed some of the bike sharing stations. So we developed one at Wilshire and Western, and then also we said, why don't we do it also near large commercial areas? For example, on Western there is a Ralph that has a huge open space where they could also have the bike sharing. So it would be both, or either in private or public land. And these are some of the design that the students devised, with also some seating and some tables where to eat, because outside Ralph people already eat. And then there is a long wall that is blank and boring and gray. And so we made this kind of sculptural piece. It's not just bike sharing, it's also where do I lock my bike? I was giving up in coming with my bike today, and I wanted to lock it at the bus stop, and there were no locking places. It was impossible to leave my bike there. So this is, again, we were studying, so we were also provoking a little bit, but these could be also fun wall to walk by and having bikes displayed in such manner. Other students start thinking even more so about my own bike, so going beyond the bike sharing, and if I ride my metro, then I need something to take it up and down my bicycle, and there are sliders. So very simple move at times that they do exist in other places, and sometimes they exist also in Los Angeles or in Long Beach, but it's difficult to implement it from neighborhood to neighborhood. So we were looking for opportunities. In the high density residential area or near the USD. And then students went from something very minimal to something much more massive and majestic, maybe too much. So you wouldn't use steel to make your car, but to store your bicycle. But again, is a provocation. And ultimately, Metro was also thinking of giving to the local bid an area to do a bike center, because one of the things the students learned in the survey was that a lot of people do not know about biking, about where that there is a possibility to use your bike or how to fix your bike. So a bike center education is really something important in the beginning phase of implementation of something new. And this center was located at Vermont and Wilshire. So we did just studies of how we could implement this center, who could use it, and just a few design of that. And then ultimately we went, as you could see from a survey, a master plan to design the bike stalls, to the logo, because communication is through everything. Every one of us remembers some of the logos that are out there. I'm not supposed maybe to say it, but there are some logos that are much more than a symbol. They become really something so vivid in our minds. So we started thinking how this could be called. And we got down to some of the graphic. So as I saw this was done a couple of years ago, and we distributed to city members, and I'm very pleased to see that it's keeping going and developing, and there are a lot of elements implemented. But I'm thinking that this for me was also a way to rethink what is a public space. What is today, how do we use today a public space? How do we occupy, and how we make it live, being alive? Is not anymore the piazza. Coming from Italy, and everybody says, oh, you have great public spaces, but how often do we really hang out in a piazza? What is a public space today? Today maybe this is a public space. This is an opportunity to create some smaller or diversified experiences. And, oops, it went blank, sorry. It went all blank. Okay, sorry. So we started to design really these stalls, these different things with my team in my office to diversify also the urban spaces, to make it a place, not just a place where we pass by. And this is, for example, is a Sunbrella, is a place where we can stop, and we can perhaps with these elements are photovoltaic panels where we can rest and charge our phones, because as we become more and more mobile as a society, we live in the morning and we go back home at night, we are more and more engaged with telephones and other devices that they need energy. So we are actually very dependent on certain tools, and we need places to recharge ourselves and recharge our tools. And these, they can become really hubs and places where we create a new sense of community. And as I started from Reynon Banham, an architect that came from the UK in the 70s, and that we still read in the School of Architecture for his poignant reading of the city, I want to close with another architect that comes to LA, studied in LA, and then moved back to northern Germany. And he became an expert biker. So in one of his recent trips to LA, he made this short video, and instead of using instead of using cars as a device to portray the city, you will see what he did. Give me 1 second. This is a short video.
something you've heard. Hey, little mama, now don't you cry. Mama's going downtown now to die. Hey, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna worry about something you've heard.
So as you can see, there are many ways of enjoying the bicycle, and Michelle will tell us some other stories. But LA is not just the beach, it's not just the freeways, it's not just, but it's many, many other things, and depends on what we wanted to make it. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is from the Santa Monica Spoke, which is a local chapter for the LA Bicycle Conservancy. And he is Richard McKinnon. He's a Recreation and Parks Commissioner of the City of Santa Monica, and he's also a member of the steering committee of the Santa Monica Spoke, Santa Monica's bicycle advocacy organization. Richard is a bicycle activist and committed environmentalist. A strategic marketing consultant, he's the chairman of Investment Capital. Please welcome Richard McKinnon.
So last year, for the first time, the number of bikes sold in the United States exceeded the number of cars. This reflects a worldwide phenomena that we are seeing. And the worldwide phenomena is that people are riding bikes everywhere all the time. And I think it's driven by generational change. The baby boom set are getting older, and with it comes this intimations of mortality due to their overeating and under-exercising and whatever else. And so they're all getting on bikes. Some of them you can see pounding up PCH on a Saturday morning in their Lycra and, doing whatever, and then maintaining their own personal Tour de France's. But there are many others that are simply using bikes for exercise. The other end of the generational change is that if you go to any campus across the United States, you could go to Stanford where there are no cars allowed in the inside of the campus, or MIT, or Davis, or Princeton. Almost any campus is beset by bikes. There are huge lines of bike parking, and bikes crowd out almost everything that happens. And for a younger group, bikes are simply a way to get around. And then the third element of generational change is that the long love affair with the suburbs has begun to end across the world, and people are starting to regard cities, and particularly inner cities, as kind of an interesting place to live again, and it's almost impossible to move around the cities. For whatever reason, the whole bike thing has become chic, it's become cool, it's kind of the in movement. It's just that there is a discontinuity at the moment between what people are doing and the way we're treated and have been treated by those who run the streets and the cities. And what Michelle alluded to was that a year or two ago, one of the most significant things that have ever happened in bike advocacy and activism happened in this city when the mayor of Los Angeles strapped on a helmet and set off on his bike to the beach for a day out. He's one of those baby boomers who's just found bikes. It's the new religion. And as he swept along the street with the security guards behind him, a taxi pulled out illegally and smacked him to the ground and destroyed his elbow in the process. What a surprise for the taxi driver when he found it was the mayor and his security detail that he'd illegally hit to the ground. Well, from that moment onwards, lots of good things began to happen. And you hate to say that it was a very fortuitous accident, but it was. because Villaraigosa seized on the bike issue as something that he could make his own. And so he convened summits and directed his staff to get with it. And so we had Ciclavia being wardening off 7 miles of downtown of the city and allowing people to ride their bikes through. A completely new use of public space in Los Angeles. We've had 2 of them, another one is next week. And we've seen what 100,000 bikes look like. There's a hell of a lot of bikes in Los Angeles. And this put the lie to the suggestion that no one rides bikes in Los Angeles, that we all drive cars. But that encapsulated the resistance that we've been having for a long time, officially and within government, to more bike. And that is, well, that's not really the way we do things around here. We're set up to move cars. That's what roads and streets and highways are for. We move cars. Second, it's a zero-sum game. If we give you something, we have to take it away from them. We're not going to do that because out there's a lot more of them than there are of you. And so therefore a bike lane is a very, very dangerous thing because it upsets a lot of people, but there's not a lot of people to speak in favour of it. Second, there's a traffic lobby. This is people who own cars, this is car organisations, this is people who sell petrol or gas to people who run cars, there's garages. There's a well set up organisation directed to maintaining the car. There's also people who build roads, and they're all invested in the car, not the bike. There's the state of the roads, which are really dreadful. I mean, riding around Los Angeles and almost anywhere here is really, really hard. You're out on the edge of the road, and there's a lot of potholes out there, and it's really difficult, and you put your life at risk, which, you know, some days, when you get that sniff of gasoline in the morning and you want a heart starter, nothing better. But I wouldn't recommend it to almost anybody, really. And then finally, I think there's a couple of other things. There's building codes that are set up to ensure that there are no bike parking in buildings, or it's around the back where it can easily, your bike can be stolen, which leads you, there's an epidemic of bike theft at the moment going on. And finally, there's just simple-minded inertia. That bloody-mindedness and bureaucracy is high and people just can't be bothered to shift. So there's a lot of reasons why bikes have not received the attention that you would think, given that they're selling all these bikes and that we have an installed base of 70%, would receive. Now, one of the things about bikes is that people talk about the ease, and the ease, as you've seen, have grown from 1 perhaps to, you know, I don't know, 16, 17, whatever. There's always a new E. But the fundamental of riding bikes is that it needs to be safe and it needs to be easy. And it is neither of those things in this metropolitan area at the moment, despite the efforts. And the marker of seeing whether it's safe or easy is when you see women on the road. Because when women are riding on the road, not the sidewalk, then you know there's a sense of comfort with the conditions. And we are starting to see some more women riding in Santa Monica. Now, Santa Monica I can talk a lot about because it's a really interesting case study and I know a lot about it, so there we go. It's about 88,000 people. We do have about 70% of the people owning a bike here. So there's, 71,000 bikes here in Santa Monica. It's a lot of bikes when you think in an 8 square mile area. There's literally thousands of bikes stacked out there on top of each other and people are using them. And what catalysed our political advocacy here a couple of years ago was when Santa Monica got allocated a bronze award from the American Legion of Cyclists, and we all thought this was an outrage. It was an outrage because there are a lot of things here, and Santa Monica had been a pace setter for a long time, but had become a placeholder. Yes, there was the bike path down at the beach, and there were other things. There was a bike to work day, there was a bike valet, which routinely attracted 600 people on a Sunday morning. There were bike lanes, there was some bike parking, there were people who rode bikes when they were policing, and so on and so forth. And there was a sense of satisfaction in the city that we had done everything that we should do, and you know what? You bike people just shut up and be happy. And on the other hand, we didn't think it was all that good because it wasn't that safe and it wasn't that easy. And I'm actually not a guy who straps on Lycra and has a $3,000 bike. I have a second-hand bike that was given to me, and I ride around like this, and I wanted to get to meetings. And my life was in danger every single damn day. And so off we set. Now, in terms of bike advocacy, some of the things, and achieving results, some of the things you need to have is you need to have a lot of persistence, because you have to turn up to a lot of meetings. You need to be well organised, and you need to have an organisation of people whose interests are the same, although they're not the same. You need to understand there's a political process that you go through, and it's full of political pressure. And as you go through this process, you have to turn up a lot, because there's commission meetings, there's board meetings, there's task force meetings, there's meetings with staff, and they all have a lot of time and they're all paid, but you're not. So off you go, and you need, simply by putting your case, to make people aware that there is a case to be made. So you need to have an argument. And the argument was, there are a lot of people with bikes, people want to use these bikes, they don't have a place to use them, it's not safe, it's not easy. And so you'd have a meeting, and then someone would walk out the door and they'd see someone riding by on a bike. And so there was a reiterative message that came through to them, you know what, I kind of would like to treat them as a pointy-headed nerd, but they're not really. They're actually advocating something that kind of reflects the feeling I've been having. Plus I'm hearing a lot about bikes, and everywhere I go all over the world, in Paris for example, I have VLib and people are bike sharing. Or I hear about this lady in New York City. And so I'd say over the last 2 years there's been an enormous shift in people's perceptions. And the payoff was that as we went along, finally people said, in this city, you know, there was a bike plan that was never adopted in 1995. Maybe it's time we did another one. So they've done another one, and they've put money into it. And 300 pages of bike plan in Santa Monica has now been developed, with a treatment for almost every street. A range of treatments, from a protected bike pathway, to bike lanes, to sharrows, to green lanes that will be appearing on Main Street and 2nd Street and Broadway within the next 6 months. There are bike sharers on the horizon. There's 2 big bike stations about to open in the mall down there. And the network effect is starting to build up. And the network effect is everything you do contributes to something else you've done, and it builds on it, and it creates this momentum that's unstoppable. And that's the key. Building a momentum that cannot be stopped by people's inertia or bureaucracy or meetings, but everybody signs on to, and they're excited about it, and there's a shared, complete vision. And the reason that you need a shared, complete vision is that it's hard to do, but it's really important to do it. We've sort of reached the end of the line where cars can keep moving into Santa Monica on a Saturday or a Sunday or at nights. We are completely jammed here for long periods of the week. So the argument that I kept making was, this is an economic imperative as well as a socially desirable thing to do. Unless we keep doing it, we can't keep growing. I also believe there's a global competition for where talent and innovation want to be, and the cities that we're competing against are Austin, Portland, Seattle, Madison, New York City, Paris, parts of Italy, parts of Denmark, and people will find this a desirable city to be in, because when they arrive, yes, we don't just have sunshine, and we don't just have a fantastic beach, we have an incredible landscape, and we have an easy way to get around, that's called the bike, and we have streets that are livable and places that people want to be, and it's built a community that everyone wants to be part of. Bikes are the leading indicator of a desirable community. When you see a bike, you see people that are happy, because bikes make people happy. If you ride a bike, you know that. When you're out there riding, you're having a great time. You're in the open air, you're having exercise, you're enjoying things, and you're seeing the city in a new way. And so all of these things come together. Now, we are lucky in Santa Monica. As we went on, you'd take a meeting with the Deputy Chief of Police, and it turned out, guess what? He was a cyclist. And he, in fact, had been doored and hit to the ground, so he knew what the door zone was intimately. Not that he reported that, so that didn't show up on the statistics. And it turned out that after the new city manager had moved here, he'd started riding a bike, because he'd heard about these bikes from the pointy heads who turned up at meetings, and he had found it a pretty desirable experience. And so what we're starting to see is that things that we're talking about, livability, the desirability, the fact that it contributes to community, that cities with bikes win out the talent war, and that there is a new way forward that doesn't abandon the past and isn't absolute, was a new way of thinking about how we could develop our city. And so we've put forward new ideas in terms of cyclovias that will be a use of public space, the lanes, and so on, and they have met a very receptive audience. And I, in particular, feel grateful to it, because what seems to me is that it's not just a recreation, and it's not just a park, it's just not activity, it's a way of doing things. And so I'm pretty confident. I got appointed the Planning Commission in this city this week, and I can guarantee it's because the 2 years on working on a bike plan have paid off, and people in this city believe it's the way forward. And I think what is so clear is that almost anywhere you live around the world, sooner or later you hear that things that start in Santa Monica have swept off, whether it's people doing yoga and Pilates 4 times a week, or whatever else you care to nominate. And I think the idea that a city like Santa Monica, part of a larger metropolitan region like Los Angeles, the car capital of the world, is embracing bikes, is a signal that the rest of the world needs to get with the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. We are running out of time. We had meant to have a Q&A session afterwards. We'll just take a couple questions. Actually, I had one question for Michelle, and that had to do with the Give Me Three program.
Laurie in her presentation showed a slide of the Give Me Three campaign that the mayor kicked off, and essentially the idea is to let motorists know they should give bicyclists 3 feet of space when they're passing. There is a bill before actually is passed through the legislature. It's on the governor's bill right now, and it's called SB 910. The sponsor is Lowenthal. We understand that the governor's on the fence about this. He's had it on his desk for 2 weeks. He hasn't vetoed it and he hasn't approved it, and we understand that he may be looking to veto it. He's reaching some opposition from the car lobby, essentially. So if you feel strongly that bicyclists should get 3 feet of space, be calling and writing the governor right now, because he is on the fence.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle, can you put up the very last slide that has the web sites?
Yeah. Get some help. Maybe we can take questions while you're doing this.
If there is any other. Yes.
So this is a conference mostly about electric cars. Do any of you want to speak to why bicycles seem to be a better transportation solution than cars, or maybe not?
Well, I can touch upon this. I mean, electric cars are great. Alternative fuels are great. It's going to help us clean up the air. And I was here in the 70s, and I remember what it looked like in the 70s. The air is a lot better now than it was because we've done a lot of things. So that's all good. Bikes take up a lot less space. While we have certainly a little cleaner air, and this will help with cleaner air, congestion is a huge, huge problem and costs this region a ton of money. Bikes can help with that.
Just one more question.
So you have a bike plan, that's great. How do you know that you have funding? What happens if the funding gets cut?
Well, I'll be quite honest, there's not very much money to do this. That said, the mayor championed the use of 5% of our local Measure R to be able to fund it. We get local TDA, which is Transportation Development Act, which is a gas tax, actually. We're also competitive at the federal and state level at chasing money. Like I mentioned, we're looking for a Tiger Grant, which is essentially a jobs bill. We're looking for $25 million to build that sort of stuff. So we're just being very aggressive in chasing whatever's out there. It's not a matter of the funding being cut. There is no money. We are chasing all the funding that's available to use in different sorts of ways and being creative.
And here in Santa Monica, the City Council and City Manager have allocated several $1 million ahead of the bike plan. So we're in the lucky position that what you see in the bike plan will be implemented, and you can see it out there happening at the moment.
Just another question.
I wonder if
I'll take 2 more.
We'll
Just 2
take
more.
both in a second.
Well, yeah, we'll take 2 and then we'll have to speak.
He's kidding, he's kidding.
Go easy, go.
I know he's kidding, but oops. I wonder if in the policy, if you've looked at making it a policy for large retailers and gas stations to have to include bike share whenever they open up.
Well, in the policy document in the City of LA's bicycle plan, there is a policy for bicycle share. It doesn't call out how it would be implemented. The mayor has a fellow there's a position funded as a fellowship right now in the City of LA's mayor's office, and this individual is looking at development of the overall program. I know she's reached out to you. We're also reaching out to Metro and looking at, so the hows are not developed yet, but there is a bike share program within the plan.
And also Metro is looking kind of at the large picture of the county to then let the cities take over for that. So there are different...
City of Long Beach is working on a program. Santa Monica has a program funded that hasn't started. So the region is looking at it. We're just trying to get everybody on board doing the same thing.
Forgive me if you touched on this before, but electric bikes, how are they going to be included and or excluded? Is there a fuzzy gray cutoff line where it's considered not an electric bike above a certain power and speed level?
because that might include more participants that may not be physically capable of pure biking, but may be invitable to
Electric bikes have changed a lot. When I first started this job and electric bikes were starting to be seen around everywhere, they were throttle driven. And those of you who remember the 70s and the moped age, I mean, that's what they were. They're mopeds that went up to 20 and some went up to 25 miles an hour. And California law allows a electric bicycle in a bicycle lane on the street. It allows local cities to make a decision whether or not they're included on bicycle paths, and that's primarily had to do with the speed differential. You know, a bicycle path provided 4 feet of space to a bicycle going one direction. If you had somebody creeping up on you while you were doing 8 miles an hour, doing 25 miles an hour, that was a real problem. The most of the electric bikes now are work in such a way that they're not throttle driven. You are pedaling, and it's essentially like a tailwind on a bike. So you are forced to pedal, and they're different. And I truly believe electric bikes are part of our future to help the boomer generation in areas where we have hills. So it's really changing how it is working, and I believe policy and the laws will follow that. Yeah.
All right, thank you everybody for attending, and if you have any other questions, feel free to come up here and ask our panelists.
I want just to add, I have a copy of the work we have done, so if you like, anyone that likes to see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.